Hello everyone, welcome to Scorched Earth Toys at anymoon.com's comparison of Bandai's Renewal version super parts and their classic now version super parts for the VF25 toys, the DX VF25 toys. The Renewal version was released April 2012 with an MSRP of 47.25 yen. The original versions were released April 2009, 3 years prior, with the MSRP of 4,000 yen. The Renewal version includes improvements on pretty much every single part. So I'm going to go through the parts, compare them, and then apply them to the vehicle to give you a feel for what we're looking at. So let's start with the crotch armors. The crotch armor here on the Renewal version, and then on the original version. On the original version you can see there's dark trim around the front of the armor. Actually gives it a better look, although it's the Renewal version clearly has a better proportion there. To apply it to the Renewal version, you actually pop off the existing piece and pop on the new part. There we go. As opposed to the original version, which just clipped right on. So people who are more aggressive as far as perfect transformation goes obviously are going to prefer the older version in that aspect. Alright, so let's move on to the leg armors. Now, as you can see on this toy, and on this piece here, the armor on the Renewal version actually wraps around. This is probably a good time to mention. On anymoon.com I will have close-ups of all of these parts so you can see the differences in paint trim and panel lining better on anymoon.com. Anyway, so here's the classic version. Doesn't wrap all the way around the leg. The Renewal version also has clips that extend outward to attach the calf armor on. So now both of these are installed the same way. They just clip on via these two pegs to the back of the leg. There we go. There we go. Now they attach to the calf armor. Pretty similar in both toys. The Renewal version has the slots to receive those extra pegs on the side. So theoretically the Renewal version will clip on a little tighter and stay on a little better. Although honestly it was never really a problem on the classic version as far as I was concerned. These parts tend to stay on pretty well. There are some little detail differences. Again, anymoon.com, you can see those closer. Randomly, let's just move on to the shield armors. Almost the exact same thing, just some proportion and detail differences. Both toys just clip on nicely to the shield. And they both do a pretty good job of staying where they go. Chest armor, again, not really much going on besides a little bit better detail on the newer version. Both of them just clip on. I find it clips on a little bit easier on the Renewal version than it does on the classic version, which there will be a common theme. Okay, let's not go on to the hip armors because they fall off a little too easily. Let's talk about the shoulders, which are probably the biggest difference between the two. The shoulder armor on the Renewal comes with a part that actually you replace off the top of the shoulder and clip it on there. And then once you have it on, you have better detailed missiles within and a hinge that actually slides up within and then you can close down. As opposed to the original version, pretty terrible detail inside and a pretty standard hinge, but no connecting part. So for the original version, kind of like with the crotch piece, you just plug it on and you're done. But on this version you have to take off a part and then apply a part. Hopefully I can do this without messing everything up. There we go. Okay, so let's go on to the back of these toys. Sorry if I'm not doing a good job keeping them erect. Alright, so you have two things that go on the back. You have your wing root and booster. Well, I guess you have three things. A wing root, a booster, and a backpack part. Now the backpack parts, well, cosmetically just about the same. There's, again, more detail on the V2. The V2 now also has an articulated nozzle. It just plugs right on, like so. V1, just about the same part, same attachment mechanism, but no articulated nozzle, less detail. Same idea, just plugs right on. Then you have these big boosters. Here, I'll move things out a little bit. You have these big boosters here. V2, articulated nozzles all over this thing. V1, you get one articulated nozzle. So, the boosters attach on both of these toys. Kind of similarly, they kind of just clip on. There we go. It's a little easier to do when you don't have a camera and lights around. Trust me on that one. Ooh, gotta get it the right way, of course. I think I got that on there. Maybe not. Alright, I'll do some fine tuning later. Back around to the side here, you have your wing roots. Both toys have almost the same exact idea here. You are going to pop off this piece here that comes standard on the toy. And you are going to install a piece that has armor. On the V2, the armor is sculpted differently and has more detail again. You can see it's longer armor. And on both of them, you just kind of pop it right on. Again, a lot easier when you can actually see what you're doing because you don't have a camera and lights in your way. Better if you switch that. There we go. More fine tuning again later. Same idea here, just pop that piece off. Put this piece on. A little bit easier on that toy. Okay. So I think we've got to the point now where we have to do the most frustrating part, pretty much for both toys here, and that's these hip armors. The V2 version is improved in a couple ways. The hinge now is a flat line across the front versus this kind of jagged line here. And the V2 has a couple more mechanisms to try to keep this armor attached. All you have on the V1 are these little tabs on either side to pop it on. You hear a little audible click, but it doesn't do much for you. On this toy, there's a couple other things that are grabbing, so it holds on a little more securely. Alright, that is it for the comparison. I'll now go through a little bit of what you can expect articulation-wise, and then transform it through the modes for you. Okay, so there's just a couple things to point out in Batroid mode. One, the shoulder missile bays, with that optional shoulder piece they attach to now, allows the ball joint to be elevated from the armor piece it's attached to, which gives you a greater range of motion and allows you to come up higher like you see in the actual show. On the V1 toys, the ball joint has to sink within that shoulder joint, and then you don't have that range of motion you would want. On the V1 toys, you also do not have any knee articulation, because this piece here runs into the knee joint, so you can't actually bend that knee back. On the V2 toys, the knee joint is completely unimpaired, and not only that, you actually can extend the leg out and get even further knee articulation. So as you can see there, no problem, oops, bending the knee. Although you can also see there is still some problems with that hip armor popping off. Although again, it is much better than it was on the V1 toy. Okay, let's move on to gear walk mode. I'm going to pause at Gearwalk just briefly enough to remind you that the V1 toys absolutely suck in Gearwalk mode. It took a lot of patience to get it to sit like this. It's obviously not very attractive, and if I try to move the toy, the hip armors will pop off or the back plate will fall down. So don't get a V1 toy with super parts and expect to display it in Gearwalk mode unless you're incredibly patient. The V2 toys, on the other hand, function perfectly well with the super parts. That's because of the underlying design of the V2 VF25 toy more than it has anything to do with the super parts. You'll also notice that the fins now have a little more clearance from the boosters than they did on the V1 toy. But that's really about it. Let's move on to fighter mode. Okay, here is fighter mode. The biggest difference to note is that on the V2 toys, you actually bring the Gearwalk joint down one and then bring the legs back. That's how the leg armor is attached to the wing pegs. On the version 1 toys, you don't bring that Gearwalk joint down at all. The legs were just straight back. I imagine that is more anime accurate. I'd have to double check my line art, but it is something to note. On both toys, the hip armors are still fidgety. Can you transform both of these toys from fighter mode to Batroid mode without knocking the parts off or taking any parts off? You don't have to take the parts off. You're probably likely to accidentally knock some parts off. But I will use my Ozma Renewal toy to show you transformation with the super parts attached with the Renewal version, so you can get an idea of, you know, how complicated that would be, especially as far as knocking parts off. Just so you know, knocking parts off, these hip armors, again, going to be your biggest culprits. Also with just handling the toy, these guys can pop off. Oh, it's kind of pegged on pretty good right now. One thing to show you that I didn't show you earlier, there's a little silver dot in there. It's theoretically a magnet, I guess. I can't swear that it does anything, so it's there, worth noting. Alright, anything else? Gun is stowed on both these toys, but looks a little more natural on the Renewal version. Renewal version, again, comes with adapters for the display stand, so you could have the super parts and the gun displayed. Alright, overall, obviously the Renewal version, a much improved version of the super parts. I did find the super parts original version on the fighter mode kind of hid some of the deficiencies of the original version, so I was happy with it, but I am much more happy with the Renewal version. Alright, visit anymoon.com for line art comparisons and more comparisons between these two. Thanks for viewing.